Dalton was last seen in the Dimensional Vortex at the end of Chrono Trigger DS, where he promised Chrono he would raise an army in Poor and get his revenge on him. As the Fall of Guardia cutscene, the events of Chrono Cross, and the words of Chief Writer Masato Kato confirm, Dalton did exactly that. Like Queen Zeal, Dalton always wanted to achieve immortality via the Mammon Machine. And where was the last place we saw the Mammon Machine? It was at the Ocean Palace incident, where Shala and the Mammon Machine were drawn into the Dimensional Vortex. Though Chrono and his friends found a damaged Mammon Machine in the Black Omen at the end of Chrono Trigger, the Black Omen is a mysterious place that straddles time. In this interpretation of events, let's say the physical shell of the Mammon Machine encountered there was a projection from the darkness beyond time. An idea which has some evidence, given that when the party faces the Mammon Machine in the Black Omen, they're transported to a strange alternate dimension, which very well could have been the darkness beyond time, where the true form of the Mammon Machine still exists. We'll come back to this idea later, but for now it's enough to say that while the Black Omen was in the sky, the Mammon Machine existed in two planes of reality, both as a damaged shell in the Black Omen, which was being projected from its true form in the darkness beyond time. With that in mind, let's speculate what happened after Chrono Trigger. After facing Chrono at the end of Trigger, Dalton spent a lot of time in the Dimensional Vortex, getting to know the place in a way no other human ever really would. Time is relative there, so who's to say how long he ruminated on his revenge, studying the entrances and exits of the Dimensional Vortex until he was ready to strike. And who's to say what all that time in the Dimensional Vortex might have done to a person's mind, especially one such as Dalton, who was questionable to begin with. And who's to say how pleased Dalton would have been to find the Mammon Machine in there with him. With this final piece of the puzzle, it was time for Dalton to get his revenge. He traced the steps of Chrono and his party after the final encounter with them, and landed himself in 1000 AD. Just a note before continuing, for the purposes of this story, we're going with the ending of Chrono Trigger, where Chrono and his friends defeated Lavos in 1000 AD, battling through the Black Omen as it hung over their homes. I take you to the event shortly after Chrono Trigger 1000 AD. Dalton goes to the leaders of Poor, warning them of an incoming attack from the Mystics. He then coordinates an attack by summoning golems, blaming the attack on the Mystics in Medina while saying they have never stopped their dark ways and have been plotting to attack humanity all this time. He then repels the golem attack, appearing as Poor's savior. He teaches Poor about gunpowder, which they'll definitely need to defend against any further aggressions. He gains the trust of the leaders of Poor by helping them to stop repeated golem attacks, which he himself is causing, keeping a very low profile as not to attract Guardian attention to himself. Before long, he establishes himself as a trustworthy guy amongst the leaders of Poor and rises to their highest ranks. It's then that he secretly uses golems to transport the damaged Mammon Machine from the Dimensional Vortex to Poor. Despite being drained of most of its power, it's still one evil machine, and helps Dalton to poison the mindset of the Porian leaders further while he continues to teach them about guns and augment their arsenal. In addition to the staged golem attacks, he hires human mercenary squads to attack Poor from the north, claiming they are invaders from Guardia. He may be a bit goofy, but he's no dummy. He was the Queen's top guy in Zeal, and he knows a lot. He knows the Mammon Machine is built of Dreamstone and controlled by Shala's pendant. He also knows the Ruby Knife, which became the Masamune, was made from Dreamstone, same as the pendant. So, he knows he's going to need either the Masamune or the Queen's pendant if he's going to try his plan to jumpstart the Mammon Machine. Both of these items are in Guardia, and he knows for damn sure he can't just walk in there. Guardia is way too strong, especially with Chrono and Marle. Unfortunately for our friends, his time in the Dimensional Vortex taught him to be patient. Now we move to 1005 AD. By this time, Dalton has amassed strong political influence, built up a huge army, and stoked the fires of Porian nationalism to a fever pitch. He finally makes his move, not to attack the Mystics in Medina, but his true target of Guardia. Due to Poor's significantly advanced weaponry and sheer numbers, Guardia falls. Guardian forces can't handle guns, no matter how good they are at swords. After the battle, Dalton claims the Masamune, but neither the Royal Pendant nor Queen Nadia, aka Marle, are to be found. No matter, he has the mass immune. He brings it to the Mammon machine, the thing which birthed it, to try and reactivate it. However, as the Dreamstone artifacts such as Shala's pendant eventually lose their magic and must be recharged, so too has the mass immune lost its charge over time. It has no effect on the damaged Mammon machine, which remains in a mostly inert state of low-level, subtly mind-warping evil. Not the ideal scenario for Dalton, but he's happy with what he's achieved. Immortality can wait, for now. He's got his revenge and power, which is also great. And he's also got some very powerful items. When Dalton raids the Vault of Guardia, he finds the Rainbow Shell and the Sunstone, two relics that are completely essential in developing Poor's awesome military might as seen in Chrono Cross. His attention falls first on the Sunstone. Dalton assembles a group of scientists to work on a top-secret project with the goal of integrating the Sunstone into the Mammon machine. However, the project ends in failure. The scientists conclude that the Mammon machine is simply too damaged. They'll need the Dreamstone to rebuild it. No matter, Dalton may not have exactly what he wants for now, but he's undeterred and above all, he's very patient. After all, Rainbow Shell alloys make extremely high-level weaponry, and the Sunstone could be used as a powerful energy source for nearly all Porian technology, if not the Mammon machine. It once powered the entire Kingdom of Zeal, after all. Of all the things which Dalton took from the Vault of Guardia, however, there is one item with which he shares a very special connection. The Wings of Time, aka the Epoch, aka Aerodalton Imperial. Though the Epoch was dismantled by Luca after Chrono Trigger, the parts were locked in Guardia's vault along with the Sunstone. Lacking advanced knowledge of technical science, Dalton is unable to restore its time-traveling ability, but he does understand aeronautics. Don't forget, he had a hand in building the Blackbird in Zeal, and he knows some pretty good science from that time. So he restores the Epoch to its former status as a flying weapon of destruction. The world has never seen a chariot such as this. It's the Aerodalton Imperial Mark II. Dalton begins a campaign of violence on Xenon, dominating the continent and drenching the mass immune in so much blood that it becomes cursed. Insofar as Poor cannot be stopped, it comes to dominate the region after the fall of Guardia. This goes on for quite some time, and Dalton conquers territory after territory on Xenon. Dalton is having so much fun being an unmatched conqueror that his dreams for immortality via the Mammon machine are put on hold. That is, until one day, a panther-looking guy appears, knowing a lot about some top-secret stuff, like times of antiquity lost to history, and a giant alien parasite which used to live under the earth. This catches Dalton's ear, and he meets with this panther person. You can't just walk up and meet Dalton at this point, mind you. He's the literal king of Xenon, continually winning the war against Guardia, who, by the way, he has propped up as a puppet state with his own people. Dalton's plan for taking over Xenon so far has been bulletproof. Get the new leaders of Guardia, who answer to him, to attack whomever he wants to invade next, so Poor can swoop in there and save the local people while keeping the entire continent locked in perpetual war and dependence on him. But yes, the panther person has definitely caught his ear with his mysterious, how does he know all that kind of talk. Dalton meets with Catman, who identifies himself as Lynx. Lynx tells Dalton about this thing called the Frozen Flame, which has limitless power to be used as an energy source for almost anything. Though Lynx doesn't say the words outright, Dalton gets the strong impression the strange Panther Man knows about Zeal's most infamous Mammon machine. Dalton is convinced. Now heavily armed with some of the world's most powerful items, Dalton expands his attention to other continents of the world, creating a huge empire and becoming the world's dominant superpower, all the while hunting for the Frozen Flame to repower the Mammon machine. As time goes on, Dalton, the innate fire magic user with the power of flight via the Aerodalton Imperial Mark II, comes to be known as the Divine Dragon of Poor. During this time, he finds the region of Alnido to be particularly interesting. Magnetic disturbances prevent him from flying the Aerodalton Imperial Mach 2 or any other aircraft over the area, and naturally Dalton becomes very curious what is there. He learns of two warriors from Alnido who have come to fight in his manufactured war on the mainland, Viper and Gurai. They prove themselves extremely adept fighters, and Dalton comes to understand General Viper to be a much beloved man in his home region. Not knowing what sort of resistance he would face if he launched an invasion of El Nido, or if it would be worth the cost of making Viper an enemy, Dalton once again exercises patience and chooses instead to infiltrate El Nido subtly. He invents the harmlessly named Explorer Corps, which he sends directly to El Nido. Before long, the Explorer Corps makes an unprecedented discovery: miraculous and powerful tools of magic, the otherworldly elements. Shocked by the news of magical items in this time period, Dalton investigates the place firsthand. He immediately feels the power of the place and plants the Masamune there. After all this time, even Dalton has grown wary of the sword's growing evil. Perhaps the aura of this place will recharge it enough to affect the Mammon Machine, or, at the very least, cleanse some of the evil energy from it. Dalton christens the area the Divine Dragon Falls and sets up a team to steal the elements found there and take them for his army. Dalton then leaves the area but sends his spies like Norris in to keep an eye on it and poke around for the frozen flame. He returns to the mainland, eager to power his army with the newfound elements. He knows that with magic on their side, it's only a matter of time before he dominates the entire planet. Now we go to 1020 AD, just after the events of Chrono Cross. Dalton's dreams are finally realized. His spies in El Nido report the insane happenings there, the fight atop Terra Tower, attack of the Dragon God, and so forth. And Dalton's curiosity finally boils over. He no longer cares for the cost of a battle against General Viper and the Acacia Dragoons, who he oddly remembers as being reported dead but are strangely alive now. Besides, whatever has happened in El Nido has halted the magnetic influence, and interference and flight over the region is finally possible. The Divine Dragon brings to bear on El Nido a force with which they could never reckon. It doesn't take long to vanquish the mighty Acacia Dragoons and conquer the region in totality. Full and unrestricted access to El Nido brings Dalton to Fort Dragonia, and he becomes fascinated by the historical murals there, especially their depiction of Dreamstone and its abundance in prehistory. Remember, Dreamstone was everywhere in prehistoric times. The Ayuka and Laruba tribes traded the Dreamstone as currency. But of all the jewels of El Nido, it is of course the Sea of Eden, now accessible for the first time, that is the shining gem. At long last, Dalton knows the location of the Frozen Flame, where it lies atop Terra Tower. With the Frozen Flame in hand, he orders Porian scientists to research the best method to interface the Frozen Flame into the top-secret Mammon Machine while pursuing other interesting facets of El Nido. One interesting thing to observe here, even as the virtual king of the world, Dalton is not immune to all forms of fear. He's already been spooked by the Masamune pretty bad, had his mind warped by both his time in the dimensional vortex and the residual evil from the Mammon Machine. But old Dalton is about to develop a new, very specific kind of psychological trauma. In Poor's investigations of Terra Tower, Dalton gets a very clear picture of some timeline where the Dragonians dominated the planet and humans were subjugated to extinction. As a human, Dalton is very pro-human, and he's appalled, disgusted, and shook to the very core by the idea of a reality where mankind is crushed underfoot as a mere footnote in the pages of history. Furthermore, he is not able to fully grasp the advanced dimensional sciences at play here, and questions surrounding Terra Tower are as frightening as the history depicted within. When will this reality come to pass? Or has it already? The unanswered questions about this confusing archaeological discovery only exacerbate the mystery, ambiguousness, and Dalton's fear of the glimpsed reptite dimension. The looming fear of the possible impending doom of humanity sticks with Dalton, instilling in him strong xenophobic tendencies and informing many of his actions hereafter. Meanwhile, Porian research in Chronopolis starts paying dividends. A most interesting find for the Divine Dragon, once king, now emperor of all known regions. Access to the records in Chronopolis expand his arsenal of knowledge to critically dangerous levels. Indeed, the records in Chronopolis allow him to restore time travel functionality to the epoch, aka Aero Dalton Imperial, and Dalton starts to get ideas. After all, conquering the world is great, but who can say they have done so across time? Dalton's endgame is finally becoming clear to him. He uses technology in Chronopolis to expand his power and sophistication of his army before enacting the next phase of his plan. Dalton has the frozen flame. It's time once again to try and revive the Mammon Machine. Alas, the Porian scientists assigned to the project meet defeat. The Mammon Machine is simply too eroded and busted up from its time in the dimensional vortex. They need Dreamstone to rebuild it. He uses the Epoch to travel to prehistory to find Dreamstone to repair and activate the Mammon Machine. He arrives to find humans warring with the Reptites. Dalton immediately deduces the Reptites must have later evolved into the Dragonians from the disgusting and horrifying Reptite timeline. He begins trading advanced guns and other weapons from Chronopolis tech with the humans in exchange for Dreamstone. For him, it is a win-win. He's happy to trade weapons with his ancestors in prehistory to enrich his supply of Dreamstone, especially if it will help eliminate the Reptites and prevent them from becoming the dominant species. When the humans' most honorable leaders, Ayla and Kino, learn of what is happening, they resist. Dalton removes them and installs leaders of the Ioka and Laruba tribes that agree to form a legion and allegiance to him, the Divine Dragon. It's at this point that Luca arrives and rewrites all of the future by eliminating Lavos. However, before she cracked Beach Bum's time egg, the normal flow of history into Balthazar's foreseen ultra-terrible future proceeded this way. Dalton was quite aware of his ultimate position and, much like Fate in Chrono Cross, believed he may lose his advantage if he altered the flow of time too radically. Even in his madness, he knows time travel is a liability. Thus, he diligently transported Dreamstone from prehistory to 1020 AD to set about reactivating the Mammon Machine to reach immortality. In this timeline, he succeeded in rebuilding the Mammon Machine. But what good is a Mammon Machine without Lavos to draw power from? Since Lavos had already been eliminated by Chrono at the Black Omen in 1000 AD, Dalton departs from 1020 AD for 620 AD, where Lavos still sleeps below the earth. Dalton builds a small city at the base of the Black Omen, which becomes his headquarters, siphoning the power of Lavos. By readjusting the seat of his power to 620 AD, he reinforces his power into the future, many times over. Inside the Black Omen, Queen Zeal existed in a timeless state, as referenced in Chrono Trigger. Unfortunately for her, she suffers from the reactivation of the Mammon Machine and the continued draining of Lavos' power. Dalton's personal quest for conquest and triumph end one fateful day when he enters the Black Omen to declare himself the ruler of the planet, of time, and the true king of Zeal, the Divine Dragon King, before finishing Queen Zeal in her weakened state. Dalton has succeeded where Queen Zeal failed, taking Lavos' power for his own and reaching immortality. Unfortunately, contact with the frozen flame now inside the Mammon Machine corrupts Dalton's mind. For all intents and purposes, Dalton's mind finally vanishes and he becomes no more than a proxy for Lavos, just as Queen Zeal had. But that's not all. The effects of Dalton's actions had a greater impact than anyone could have imagined. You see, a Mammon Machine powered by the frozen flame and augmented with Chronopolis technology was more powerful than its previous form. More rapid and intense draining of Lavos' energy invoked a survival response from the creature, and it ultimately led Lavos to a premature awakening. Thanks to Dalton, and this, the Keystone timeline we all know and love, the day of Lavos came 1100 years prior to its previous time, occurring now in 900 AD. This was the future Balthazar wrought by creating a reality where Dalton could access the frozen flame. As for what happened after the new day of Lavos, the Divine Dragon's eternal empire, spanning from 620 AD to 900 AD, was highly developed, and Por was able to survive the apocalypse better than most. They went on to dominate the globe for over a millennia until Balthazar finally encountered them in 2280 AD. As for Dalton himself, his connection to Lavos brought him forewarning of the coming disaster. Before the day of Lavos, Dalton himself retreated to 2280 AD, to a stronghold he had prepared there, which was built by Reptite slaves imported from prehistory. From there, he reigned over his native timeline and the destroyed planet, all while protecting Death Peak so that Lavos' spawn could spread throughout the cosmos. There you have it. The ultimate bad ending. This was the true fate of the Keystone timeline that Balthazar inadvertently created with Project Kid and Chrono Cross. That's what you get for messing with time. Dalton's definitely going to get the Frozen Flame and mess everything up. Unfortunately for Balthazar, he didn't really get a chance to learn about all this before his time was up. He was able to communicate to Luca via the temporal entanglement of the New and get her that time egg, a one-way ticket to 65 million BC. What happened after Luca returned to the Dalton-ruled prehistory, worked herself into an uneasy truce with the Reptites, and killed Lavos? We'll also look at how Luca's compassion and Azala's thirst for advanced technology led to a new villain and the start of the broken timeline.